Amara stood in the kitchen, her body aching and covered in sweat. The smell of burning oil filled the air as she struggled to lift a heavy pot. She was 8 months pregnant, and every movement felt exhausting. Her feet were swollen, and her back hurt. But her husband, Banele, didn't seem to notice or care. Outside, Banele and his friends laughed loudly as they drank and enjoyed themselves. He had invited them over without even asking her. Now, he expected her to cook for them, as if she wasn't carrying their child. "Amara, hurry up! My friends are hungry," he shouted impatiently. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath to stop herself from crying. This wasn't how she had imagined her life. She had once dreamed of a happy marriage, filled with love and care. But now, she felt more like a servant than a wife. Still, she kept quiet and continued cooking. But deep inside, something was changing. Tonight, things would not go the way Banele expected. When Amara first married Banele, he was a different man. He was kind, loving, and always made her feel special. He used to help her in the kitchen, surprise her with little gifts, and hold her hand when they walked together. She believed she had found the perfect husband, but everything changed when she got pregnant. At first, she thought he was just nervous about becoming a father, but soon she realized the truth. Banele no longer cared about her the way he used to. He stopped helping around the house. If she was tired, he didn't notice. If she was in pain, he ignored it. It was as if he believed carrying their child was only her responsibility. Amara tried to talk to him many times. "Banele, my back hurts a lot today. Can you help me with the dishes?" But he would wave his hand and say, "You're just pregnant, not sick. Stop complaining." It broke her heart. She thought pregnancy would bring them closer, but instead, it pushed them apart. Banele started staying out late with his friends. While Amara lay alone in bed, feeling their baby kick inside her, Banele was out drinking, laughing, and acting like nothing had changed. She wanted to believe he would change when the baby arrived. Maybe he was just scared. Maybe he didn't know how to handle his feelings. But tonight, she knew the truth. Tonight, he had invited his friends over without asking her. He had forced her to cook for them, even though she was exhausted. He had shouted at her like she was a maid, not his wife. Amara stirred the pot of food, her hands trembling with anger. She could hear Banele's loud laughter from the living room. He was enjoying himself while she suffered in the kitchen. She thought about all the nights she had cried herself to sleep, all the times she had begged him to be there for her, all the times he had made her feel unimportant. A sharp pain shot through her back, making her gasp. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby move. Her child deserved better than this. She took a deep breath, blinking back tears. If Banele thought she would suffer in silence forever, he was wrong. Tonight, something inside her had changed. And soon, Banele would realize that too. Amara stood over the stove, stirring the pot as the steam rose, making her light-headed. Her hands trembled from exhaustion. She hadn't eaten all day, too busy cleaning, cooking, and trying to keep up with Banele's endless demands. Her feet ached, her back throbbed, and her swollen belly felt heavier than ever. A sharp kick from the baby made her gasp. It was as if her child could feel her pain, could sense her suffering. She placed a gentle hand on her stomach, whispering a silent promise. Just a little longer. She turned to Banele, her eyes pleading. "Banele, I need to rest. I'm not feeling well." For a moment, she thought he might understand, that he might see how tired she was, how much she had done for him today. But instead, he scoffed, not even bothering to look up from his drink. "Pregnancy isn't an illness, Amara. Stop acting weak." His friends burst into laughter. One of them slapped Banele on the back. "Women these days, always looking for an excuse to be lazy." Amara felt her stomach twist, not just from hunger, but from humiliation. Her face burned, and for a second, she thought she might cry, but she forced the tears back. She had cried enough. She clenched her fists by her sides. If only they knew. If only they knew how she had spent the entire day on her feet, scrubbing the floors, washing the dishes, preparing food for a group of men who didn't even have the decency to say thank you. If only they knew how she lay awake at night, alone in bed, while Banele went out to drink and laugh with these same men, leaving her to rub her aching belly in silence. If only they knew how she'd sacrificed everything for a husband who treated her like nothing. A wave of anger rose inside her, stronger than before. It was new, unfamiliar, and powerful. She had spent months suffering in silence, but not anymore. She forced a smile, something calm and unreadable. Then, without a word, she turned back to the pot, stirring slowly, her mind racing. Tonight, everything would change. And Banele wouldn't even see it coming. Amara carried the heavy tray of food to the table, her legs shaking beneath her. Every part of her body ached. Her back felt like it was breaking, and her feet were so swollen that each step was painful. But she kept going. She had no choice. She placed the food in front of Banele and his friends, her breath uneven. The smell of the food filled the air, rich and warm. The men didn't even glance at her. They simply grabbed their plates and started eating, laughing and joking as if she wasn't there. Amara waited just for a moment. Maybe someone would say thank you. Maybe Banele would finally see how hard she had worked, how much pain she was in. But then, Banele turned to her with a cold look. "Go clean up the kitchen," he said flatly, as if she was nothing more than a servant. Something inside Amara broke. For months, she'd swallowed her pain. She had ignored the exhaustion, the loneliness, the endless demands. She had told herself it would get better, that Banele would change, that one day he would remember the love they once shared. But this was too much. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. She stared at Banele, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not sadness, not exhaustion, but anger. Pure, burning anger. She could feel the baby moving inside her, as if her child could sense her emotions. A deep, heavy weight settled in her chest. No more. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She simply turned. Without a word, she walked to the bedroom, slowly, calmly. The moment she stepped inside, she locked the door behind her. For the first time in months, she chose herself. Banele didn't notice. He was too busy eating, too busy laughing with his friends. But his friends noticed. The laughter at the table faded. One by one, the men exchanged glances. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Something wasn't right. And soon, Banele was going to realize it too. Banele leaned back in his chair, laughing loudly as he took a sip of his drink. His friends were joking, eating, enjoying themselves. The evening was perfect, at least for him, but something felt off. The usual lively chatter had dimmed. His friends weren't laughing as much anymore. Some of them were barely touching their food. The air in the room had shifted. Tunde, his closest friend, finally broke the silence. His voice was calm, but sharp. "Banele, are you serious?" Banele frowned. "What do you mean?" Tunde put down his drink and leaned forward. "You made your wife cook for us while she's 8 months pregnant? And then you ordered her to clean up too?" Banele blinked, confused. "So what? She's my wife. She takes care of the house." Silence. Then Kwaku, another friend, slowly pushed his plate away. He had barely eaten. He sighed and shook his head. "I can't eat this," Kwaku muttered. "Not after seeing what she went through." Banele's stomach twisted. "Come on, guys. It's not a big deal." Tunde's eyes darkened. "Not a big deal." She was struggling, Banele. She looked like she was about to collapse. "And you didn't even care." Banele's confidence wavered. He had expected praise. He had expected them to enjoy the meal, maybe even joke about how he had the perfect wife. But instead, they were judging him. For the first time, a strange, uncomfortable feeling crept into his chest. Embarrassment. He looked around, noticing the way his friends avoided his gaze. Some of them had stopped eating completely. The energy in the room had shifted. And suddenly, Banele realized he wasn't the man they admired. He was the man they pitied. Banele shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The room felt different now. He could feel the weight of his friend's stares. Kwaku leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Tunde, isn't your wife pregnant too?" Tunde nodded, his jaw tight. "Yes, and I would never treat her like this." His voice was filled with disappointment. "She's carrying my child. She's already doing so much. Why would I make her suffer more?" Banele opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. Another friend, Kwaku, crossed his arms. "Banele, we came here to relax, but what we saw tonight, It wasn't right. One by one, the men stood up, pushing their plates away. You need to appreciate your wife, one of them said. Before it's too late, another added. Banele's face burned. He had thought tonight would be fun, a chance to enjoy himself. He had expected admiration, maybe even envy from his friends, but instead, they looked at him with disappointment. He wasn't the respected man he thought he was. He was a husband who had failed his wife. Amara sat on the bed, her body heavy with exhaustion. Her swollen feet throbbed and her back ached. She had given everything to Banele, her love, her energy, her patience. But tonight, something inside her had changed. She heard footsteps outside the door, then a pause. A soft knock followed. The door creaked open, and Banele stepped inside. He didn't look as confident as before. His usual arrogance was gone. Amara. His voice was quiet, almost uncertain. My friends left. She didn't answer. He shifted uncomfortably. They told me I was wrong. Amara's hands rested on her belly. The baby inside her kicked gently, as if reminding her that she wasn't alone. Her heart ached, but not in the way it used to. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was disappointment. She finally looked at him, her eyes tired but strong. Did you really need them to tell you that? Banele opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer, because deep down, they both knew the truth. If his friends hadn't spoken up, he wouldn't have realized his mistake, and that hurt more than anything else. Amara took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding, but she knew what she had to say. She had been silent for too long. Banele, she said firmly, looking him straight in the eyes. I won't do this anymore. Banele's face changed. He looked confused, even a little nervous. What do you mean? He asked. Amara sat up straighter. Her body was tired, but her spirit was stronger than ever. I mean, I'm done being treated this way, she said. I deserve love. I deserve respect. And if I don't get that from you, she paused, letting the words sink in. I will leave. Banele's eyes widened. He took a step closer, almost as if he hadn't heard her right. Leave, he repeated, his voice uncertain. Amara, don't say things like that. But she wasn't just saying it. She meant it. For years, she had been patient. She had hoped he would change. She had done everything to make their home happy. But love was not supposed to be one-sided. She was his wife, not his servant. Banele let out a nervous laugh. Come on, Amara. You're just upset. You wouldn't really leave. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she held his gaze, making sure he saw the truth in her eyes. Try me, she said softly. His smile faded. Panic flickered in his eyes. He had always thought she would stay no matter what. He had taken her love for granted, and now, for the first time, he was afraid. Banele stood frozen, staring at Amara. Her words echoed in his head. She would leave. For the first time, fear gripped his heart. He had always thought Amara would stay no matter what. She had always been patient, always forgiven him, but now, she was different. There was steel in her voice, strength in her eyes, and he knew she meant it. Memories flooded his mind, hitting him like waves. He remembered when they first got married, how she had held his hand when he struggled to find a job, how she had encouraged him when he wanted to give up. She had believed in him when no one else did. He thought of the nights she stayed up late, sewing his torn shirts because they couldn't afford new ones. The times she had gone without so that he could have enough. She had loved him completely, given him everything. And how had he repaid her? By treating her like a servant, by making her cook while heavily pregnant, by ignoring her pain. His stomach twisted. He wasn't a loving husband. He was a selfish man who had taken the best thing in his life for granted. His chest felt tight. Amara! His voice was hoarse. He stepped closer, but she didn't move. She just watched him, waiting for him to understand. He swallowed hard. I don't want to lose you. For the first time, the truth was clear. If he didn't change, if he didn't truly appreciate her, he would lose the only person who had ever truly cared about him. The morning sun streamed through the window as Amara slowly opened her eyes. Her body still ached from the night before, but something was different. The house was quiet. Too quiet. She sat up, confused. Where was Banele? Then she smelled something. Food. Frowning, she pushed herself up and walked to the kitchen. What she saw made her freeze. Banele was standing at the stove, flipping pancakes. The kitchen, which was usually a mess after his late-night gatherings, was spotless. He turned and saw her. His face was nervous, uncertain. Good morning, he said softly. Amara blinked. What are you doing? He placed a plate of pancakes on the table, making breakfast. She stared at him. In all their years together, Banele had never cooked for her, not once. He pulled out a chair for her. Sit, please. Still in shock, she sat down. He poured her a glass of juice, then hesitated before speaking. I cleaned the house too. She glanced around. He wasn't lying. The floors were swept, the dishes were washed, and everything was in its place. I'm sorry, Amara. His voice was quiet, but there was something real in it. I was wrong. About everything. She held the fork in her hand, but she didn't take a bite. Why now? She asked. Banele sighed. Because I finally understand. I thought you would always stay. I thought love meant you would forgive me no matter what. But love isn't just taking. It's giving too. Her heart ached at his words. She had wanted this change for so long. But was it too late? Banele looked at her, his eyes filled with fear. I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I want to be better. I need to be better. Amara looked at the breakfast in front of her. It wasn't perfect. The pancakes were slightly burned, and the juice was a little too full. But for the first time in a long time, Banele had tried. She picked up her fork and took a bite. Banele watched her, waiting, holding his breath. She swallowed and met his eyes. It's a start. His shoulders sagged in relief. He knew this was just the beginning. Now it was up to him to prove that he had truly changed. Amara wasn't ready to trust Banele just yet. She had heard his words before. Apologies, promises, sweet talk. But words meant nothing without action, so she watched. And to her surprise, Banele didn't just talk this time. He acted. The first real change came the next evening. Amara sat on the couch, rubbing her swollen feet, when Banele walked in with a bowl of warm water. Without a word, he knelt before her and gently placed her feet inside. She gasped. What are you doing? Taking care of my wife, he said simply. She wanted to pull away, but the warmth of the water soothed her aching body. She said nothing, only watching as Banele carefully massaged her feet. The next morning, she woke up to find him already awake, fixing the baby's crib. He had bought baby clothes, folded tiny blankets, and even read books about fatherhood. I want to be ready, he said. A small part of her heart softened, but she wasn't fully convinced. So, she tested him. One evening she asked, Banele, can you get me some fruit? She expected him to groan, to ignore her like before. Instead, he stood up immediately. Of course. What do you want? She listed 3 different fruits, certain he would complain, but he rushed out and returned with all of them. Days passed, and the changes continued. He no longer spent his nights drinking with friends. Instead, he stayed home, helping her with chores, asking about the baby, and making sure she was comfortable. One night, as she lay in bed, she felt a soft touch on her belly. She looked down to see Banele resting his hand gently over their baby bump. He smiled. I can feel the baby kicking. She swallowed hard. You never cared before. His eyes were filled with regret. I was a fool, Amara. I didn't see how much you were giving. I didn't see how much I was taking. Tears welled in her eyes. And now? Now, I know what I almost lost. His voice broke. And I don't ever want to lose you. She studied his face, searching for lies. But for the first time, she saw the truth in his eyes. Banele had changed. It had taken almost losing her to realize her worth. But now, he was fighting to be the husband she deserved. And slowly, Amara started to believe in him again. The hospital room was quiet, except for the soft cries of their newborn daughter. Amara held the tiny baby close to her chest, her heart overflowing with love. She had dreamed of this moment for months, but now that it was here, it felt even more magical. Beside her, Banele sat completely still, staring at the baby with wide, teary eyes. He looked like a man who had just witnessed a miracle. She's beautiful, he whispered. His voice shook with emotion. Amara smiled softly. Their daughter had his nose, but her tiny hands reminded Amara of her own mother. Banele reached out hesitantly. Can I hold her? For a moment, Amara said nothing. There was a time when she thought Banele would never be the kind of father she wanted for her child. A time when she had prepared to leave, thinking he would never change. But the man sitting beside her now was different. Slowly, she placed the baby in his arms. Banele held his daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world. His hands trembled as he cradled her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't deserve this," he murmured. "After everything I did, I don't deserve you or her." Amara's heart ached at his words. She had been so close to walking away, and if she had, maybe he would have never learned his lesson. But she had stood up for herself. She had refused to accept a life of suffering, and because of that, he had changed. Not for her, not out of fear, but because he had finally realized what love truly meant. "You worked hard for this second chance, Banele," she said softly, "and I see the man you've become." Banele looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Amara. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for giving me a chance to be a better husband and a better father." Amara leaned back against the pillows, exhaustion creeping in. She had fought so many battles, but as she watched Banele rocking their daughter gently, she realized something important. She had not only saved herself, she had saved her family. This wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning. The screen lingers on the peaceful image of Amara, Banele, and their newborn daughter. A family that had come dangerously close to falling apart, but had found a way back to love. Banele had once been blind to the pain he caused. He had taken Amara's love and kindness for granted, thinking she would always stay no matter how badly he treated her. But he was wrong. It wasn't his begging that saved their marriage. It wasn't just his words. It was Amara's strength. She had refused to be disrespected. She had drawn the line and made it clear. Either he changed or she would walk away. And that was what finally made Banele see the truth. The screen darkens and soft music plays. A powerful message appears. Never take the person who loves you for granted, because when they walk away, you might not get another chance. Banele had almost lost everything, but thanks to Amara's courage, he learned the true meaning of love and respect. As the screen fades to black, one final message appears. Cherish those who sacrifice for you, because one day they might stop.